Higher knowledge and skills. In addition, authentic assessment is the idea of using creative learning experiences to test students' skills and knowledge in realistic situations. Authentic assessment measures students' success in a way that is relevant to the skills required of them once they've finished course or degree program. An authentic assessment is one that requires students to apply what they've learned in a new, complex circumstances or situation. This is also known as a performance assessment, alternative assessment, and direct assessment. Now, typically, an authentic assessment can take two forms. It could be a real world assessment that requires students to engage in actual situations in their field, or it could be a realistic task, realistic assessments that are relevant in nature but have students engage in a situations that mimic the real world. For example, a case study. Authentic assessment also asks students to engage in scenarios or practices that are complex and realistic. Now, what does authentic assessment look like? Authentic assessment include a task for students to perform and a rubric by which their performance can be evaluated. So for authentic assessment, rubric is tied up with authentic assessment. Now maybe you're wondering what's the difference of authentic assessment and this traditional assessment? Both of them aims to develop productive citizens. Authentic assessment break the traditional paradigm of multiple choice or automatically scoring tests or quizzes, which can lead students to believe that learning means staying up all night and cramming to memorize terms and expected answers. Instead, authentic assessment tend to be more student-centered. The students to demonstrate their learning through hands-on activities. Rather than asking the students to memorize or recall facts, authentic assessment asks the students to actively participate in situations that require them to apply the principles they've learned about in the instructional material. Thus, learning isn't about recalling, it's about performing, which ideally will motivate students to engage in course and succeed in their endeavors. Now, these are for For traditional assessment, these are the examples: multiple choice test, gap fill, true or false, matching type. But for authentic assessment, these are the inventory, peer rating, self-rating or peer assessment, self-assessment. You could have journals, it could be portfolios, discussions, and interviews. Now, I will be posting in your Moodle the different type of authentic assessment with their corresponding definitions. Okay? Now, maybe you would ask, what are the benefits of using this authentic assessment? Similarly, we are different in how we can best demonstrate what we have learned. Authentic assessment can pave the way, can give um, opportunity for us to best demonstrate our learning. Okay, the students are given their own pace on how to demonstrate such a learning. With all the benefits of the authentic assessment, there are also challenges that are present. First and foremost, authentic assessment requires more time for both students and instructors rather than the traditional assessments. For students, authentic assessment typically take longer to complete than the average quiz or test. Because these types of assessment are task-based, they might be scaffolded over a number of modules or some other period of time. So it will require them longer time to finish, to complete the task. For instructors, time is also a concern. Developing an authentic assessment can be intense experience that requires course writers to identify or research on relevant tasks, ensure that those tasks are applicable to students in different areas, and align those tasks with learning objectives and instructional materials. So basically, it will need a lot of your time to really construct or make the authentic assessment. In addition, unlike many traditional assessments, grading an authentic assessment is largely subjective because these types of assessments typically address more complex levels of learning. Grading will likely take much longer. That's why, since this is a subjective grading, it is a must, or as what I have said earlier, that rubric is tied up with authentic assessment for us to have basis on how they will be graded and how they will perform the assigned task. And lastly, it will require Um, Authentic assessment typically require detailed, personalized, and specific feedback, meaning that as beneficial as they can be for students and your course, they will require additional time to design and implement. Okay, so when you do authentic assessment in a large number of students, and then you need to give them detailed personalized feedback, of course it will really require a lot of time for you to really have this to your students. Okay, now that we've explored the benefits and drawbacks of authentic assessment, let's move to the steps involved in designing one. The following steps, based on those developed by the University of Florida Center for Instructional Technology and Training 2018, can help us teachers set our way towards developing an authentic assessment that addresses your learning objectives, enhances your course, and meets your students' needs. First step is identify the standards or objectives. Your learning objectives are the cornerstone of your course. They communicate what students should be able to do and what skills they will develop during the course. Whether they have done it well. After all, just because an authentic assessment doesn't look like a traditional assessment, it doesn't mean that the goal isn't the same. You still need to have an indication of how well students have performed and whether they have achieved mastery. With this in mind, it is important for these performance criteria to align with the nature of the task. It should be clearly stated, it should be brief and observable, and the statement of behavior is written in the language that the students can understand. And the last step, the step 4, create the rubric or developing a rubric. Rubrics are a powerful tool for many assessment types, and they are essential component of authentic assessment. After all, authentic assessments are fairly subjective, and rubrics help ensure instructors are grading fairly and consistently from assessment to assessment and student to student. Once you have developed your rubric, consider it presenting to students before they begin the assessment. But that way, they know what you expect of them and can more readily gauge their own performance. So we cannot really give them assessment or this particular task if that is not related to the discussion. And then before asking them to perform it, they must know how they will be graded and what are the things that they need to emphasize or they need to focus. Okay, as a conclusion, authentic assessment has the outstanding ability to make a long-lasting impact on not only your course but also the students enrolled in it, by providing students with an opportunity to test their skills in new and relevant situations. You'll prepare them for how they will be assessed in their professional lives and show them the relevance of your course content outside the classroom. Alright, these are the references and sources. And I hope that you are learning with the discussion, and I hope to see you in the next video.